I am terrified of the ocean. As a matter of fact, I'm terrified of any large bodies of water, including lakes, ponds, and your mom. With roughly 71% of Earth being water, and there being 3.88 billion women, it's no wonder why I have so much anxiety. But what if that's all there was? No, not women. What if I wanted to be in a world of nothing but water? Could I even survive? I have played Subnautica before, but without getting any spoilers, I got to a portion of the game that you had to go deeper and deeper, and I just stopped playing. It genuinely scared me so much that I couldn't beat the game. Today, we fix that. Today, we conquer a horror game that isn't advertised as a horror game. Today, we beat Subnautica. Getting launched from the Aurora, we are smacked in the face with a metal cover and briefly lose consciousness. Waking up, I grab the fire extinguisher and put out the fire that built up while I was out. Looking at the PDA, I get a feel for the UI and the mechanics of the game. This does take me a little while to get used to, but eventually I step outside and see the wreckage resting in the distance. It's remarkable how empty everything feels when there isn't any landmasses anywhere. Taking my first dive, I immediately feel overwhelmed, not only at its beauty, but at how much is unknown. I start collecting pieces of scrap, all the while, ever so slowly, getting used to my new environment and taking more gas for air than what is really necessary. I spent a lot of time in the game just looking at crafting recipes, so I'll be sure to try to cut out most of my confusion. Eventually, I started going a little bit deeper, exploring the lower areas of the safe shallows. Going into caves felt uncomfortable and claustrophobic, but it was necessary if I was to gather the supplies necessary to make O2 tanks, the repair tool, and the analyzer. I began looking for sulfur and ran into my first hostile mob. Hearing their sound puckers up my butthole a little bit more than I care to admit, but eventually I grab some sulfur, head back to the life pod to cook up and eat some food. First item I make is the scanner, or analyzer like I mentioned just because it has anal in it. It's a really useful tool, but as I go out to try it, I find out that the sun has fallen. While I've made it through the first day, I'm still not comfortable. I do try to explore a little bit more during the night, but it's oddly terrifying. I sneak through the caves collecting more resources like copper, gold, silver, lead, quartz, and sulfur. I never really strayed too far from the life pod though. Confusion seemed to follow me everywhere. Silicone was nowhere to be seen in the shallows, so I knew I was going to have to go deeper and farther out to find what I needed. Before building up enough courage to do that though, I gather more supplies and see what else is nearby. Never in this game did I ever feel like I knew where I was going. Without the marker, I would have gotten lost so many times. I did start using the analyzer to research a bunch of seagull egg parts. It'd be a useful tool that hopefully increased my ability to get out of scary situations. At the life pod, I make a high capacity tank, allowing me to stay alive much longer underwater. It's almost like that's what they're used for or something. Eventually, I find out that I need to head to the creepvine area, don't roast me, I'm a virgin, to find the resources to make lubricant, silicone rubber, and fiberglass mesh. My first experience with stalkers went as well as expected, and I almost ruined my 3 pairs of underwear. I wear 3 because every time I get up from leather seats, there is always a wet spot if I don't. Eventually armed with a knife and a repair tool, while feeling like a badass, I repair the broken devices in the pod, and am able to get a distress signal from the Aurora by using the radio. It is so nice to be able to have lights again, that I really never realized how much I appreciated them. By researching those fragments I mentioned earlier and using a battery, lubricant, copper wire, and some titanium at the fabricator, I was able to craft the Seagull Head. This is one of the best items in the game outside of the analyzer. Not only is it really fun, but it speeds up literally everything and allows a better chance of escaping from scary monsters. Now that we've gotten past the first major section of the game and have proven ourselves capable of swimming short distances without dying, we need to try going deeper. It's actually slightly embarrassing how many times I've told my exes the same line. Using the local fish, I'm able to stock up on a little bit of food and water. Despite this game taking place on an alien planet and objects being created with lasers, it is slightly realistic in that food does go bad eventually if you don't turn it into beef jerky. So I do end up learning that this was a mistake later, but only the fish's lives were affected, so we're all good. After having a needlessly large feast, I go for another swim, this time to do even more scanning. I scan everything from the scanner room fragments to the grab ball fragments to even myself. If you haven't played this game, be sure to listen to all the PDA and log messages that you find because they make up much of the game's lore. After moseying around for a little bit, I find myself in the red grassy area. The large creatures above and the rock pillars kind of make this place feel cozy in a hey I like being uncomfortable so please tie me up and tickle my feet kind of way. So I take note of it in my steel trap and look around for LifePod 17. Due to the power of video editing, I found it almost immediately. Right outside the door I find a fragment of the sea moth, something that would prove useful in acting as a butt plug later on in the run. Right around the life pod, I do find a giant hole that I find incredibly attractive, but I'm too scared to ask out. Returning to my abode, I catch up on a few things in the local newspaper and end up getting stuck on a crossword puzzle. If you got a 5-letter word for a hole that starts with G and involves a physical barrier, let me know. After getting another call from the FBI and taking little Timmy to his swimming lessons, I stumble across LifePod 3. Inside, I find another clip from my Pip-Boy and the crafting recipe for the compass. It's here that I also discover that you can use a knife to collect creepvine. Who would have guessed? Just know that each and every time that I use who in a script, that I think I'm being witty with my name being Owl. I'm not, but please don't tell me that. Now that we've amassed quite a few goodies, I've taken to using some storage containers. These are absolutely awful, and I would avoid them at all costs if I was you. But they did the job as well as someone posting an offer on Craigslist as a locksmith, but being unable to help unlock chastity cages. I call that false advertising. At one point I found a giant coral tube full of all sorts of good things. I would make a sounding joke here, but some people have commented telling me that they don't like my humor. At another wreck, I found 2 very important fragments. A sea moth fragment and a nuclear waste disposal fragment. Finally, I have somewhere to put Scooter's nudie magazines. One of the things about this game that is very similar to a game that you might have heard of, Minecraft, is that there is a lot of mining that you have to do. It is really satisfying at first, but after collecting the resources for the 1000th time, it gets a little bit stale. I usually like to be a hoarder, but this game does have limited storage space, so I end up usually having to leave stuff behind, or make the long trek back to my base more times than I would really want to. I ended up starting to feel really confident in the shallows and in the red grassy areas, so much so that I started to go out on night dives. I mentioned Minecraft a second ago as a little bit of a joke, but one of the things I really like about the game is that you can find a seemingly innocent plot of land and completely transform it into whatever you want. I mention that now because as I scan the final fragment of the sea moth at the base of this wreckage, I get to see the untouched land that would eventually grow to be my home. One of the things I love about being a YouTuber and sharing my stories with you all is that I get to live through my playthroughs several times. The journey you are all about to go on is beautiful, and honestly brings me to tears thinking about. This is the largest wreck that I've found so far. Inside I've found several useful parts, including some from the mobile vehicle bay, which I'd unfortunately need to be able to craft the sea moth and several useful vehicles later. In Fortnite terms, this will help us get us the dub. Let me know if I use that right, please. Shortly after being hip, the Aurora blew up. At first, I just kinda sat there and watched like a wedding night after my first marriage, but eventually I bolted towards the nearest metal box. In one case it was an elevator, in the other case it was a life pod. As I struggled to breathe through my ball gag, I found myself questioning how this event would affect my life. According to the PDA, radiation would start to spread my voluptuous badonkadonk, so I would need a radiation suit to prevent my demise. Fortunately, due to the power of video editing, I can obtain that suit rather quickly. Unfortunately, we can't make a rebreather radiation helmet combo like you can find at Burger King, so swapping between the two will have to do. After doing those things that people unfortunately need to do, including eating, drinking, coming, and collecting table coral, I head out into the night to find more fragments. If I were to have creative flexibility to select an alternative name for Subnautica, it would be Fragment Hunter. I'm sure I wouldn't run into any backlash from any of those other companies. One of the things you need a lot of in this game is titanium. As much as I'm sure you'd like to shove your fist into a pile of metal scrap, this is best left to professionals. Here's another great shot of me swimming at the site of our future base before I start laying down the first few blocks. I learned pretty slowly that I was going to need power if I was going to have a good base. My slightly intelligent self thought that placing an air filter thingy that I would be able to breathe inside the base, but it turns out that I would need to use solar panels so that the base could magically produce oxygen. Since solar panels need materials and the sun, I'm going to let you enjoy a few moments of me collecting resources and waiting for that lucky old sun. Once inside, I realized it was going to be a while before this base would be useful. No fabricator meant no crafting, and no storage meant that I couldn't hoard anything. This caused me to be rather distraught, but after an hour of collecting resources, swimming back to the life pod, and swimming back to the new base, I finally had something that I could call home. As I sat back and crafted more materials, I felt content and proud of the progress that I had made. Little did I know, I would have to do the same thing many, many more times to actually complete the game. You see, Subnautica has what is called a gameplay loop. After the initial steps of getting the sea glide and building a base, you have to do it all over again. This means more exploring, finding more life pods, and surfacing for air. I really didn't recognize this pattern while playing the game, so don't let my observations let you think that it wasn't enjoyable. Part of the reason I came to love this game is that it's so easy to get lost in. There's this giant world that is meant to take you away to an experience that you've never had. To a world straight out of a dream. Speaking about dreams, I've got one for you. I was riding on my bicycle, my red Schwinn that I had gotten for Christmas a few years ago. It is an absolutely stunning bike, but I had unfortunately not maintained it as well as what I should have over the years, so the gears started to stick every so often, causing a slight clunk that shook the seat beneath me in a moment or two of lost control. On this particular day, it was chilly. I didn't feel cold, but I could see my breath as the heat reacted to the cold air. My bike raced across the bumpy ground, though the feeling wasn't present. My mind, for whatever reason, was blank, following only its impulses as I was carried to the top of the mountain. Steep Point had this giant red lighthouse that Mr. Anders had taken good care of. Every few years, he paints it while hanging down from a pulley system connected to the upper railing next to the torch itself. Now, as I watched him dangling there with his brush and a rusty can of paint, I found myself hyper-focusing on him while I kept pedaling forward. Mr. Anders was an older gentleman, a good bit shorter than average, but a good bit heavier to make up the difference. He always wore these flannels that hid his belly, and today he chose to wear a deep green color like seaweed. If you were to get one quick glance at this man's face, you'd say he was always in a happy disbelief, eyes wide with a slight smile in the process of developing like camera film, but never quite having enough motivation to produce anything. A large white beard with a few splotches of paint were what I saw before the gears on my bike froze. The giant red lighthouse isn't the only thing that Steep Point is known for. After all, it had to get its name from something. At the far side of the mountain, overlooking the ocean, was a steep drop-off. As my bike clunked, startling me away from my hyperfixation on the spots of paint in Mr. Anders' beard, I realized too late that I was going off the steep drop-off. Still, with plenty of speed and momentum, I flew far from the wall of rocks. Some may call this luck as I passed the rocks at the base of the point. Others would recognize that the cold weather and icy water below would be a death sentence regardless. I wasn't thinking of any of this. Instead, my mind danced in slow motion. The clicking of the wheels as the chain started spinning, my hair smacking against my forehead, with skin a little bit tighter than normal due to the cold, and blood forming at my chapped lips that I now bit into furiously. This isn't one of those stories that the hero comes by and saves the child, preventing them from a miserable death. I was forced to live through it all. I would mention my bone shattering as my tiny body hit the water, but I never broke a bone, so I wouldn't know what it felt like. Besides, the cold was inviting me deeper into the water, my hands frozen with shock, clinging to the handlebars and the foot straps anchoring me down to the sinking metal. As I was brought deeper, the light from the already overcast day faded. Instead of the cool blue, I began to see a deep green. Where have I seen this color? Oh, Mr. Anders' shirt. The darkness flooded me and took away any feeling that I had. My heart yearned for something, but I didn't know what it was until I saw her. The silhouette of a young girl, long wavy hair hanging above her resting in the water, formed in front of me. A warm glow trailed behind her, and I felt myself suddenly at peace in her embrace. No feeling but a racing heart. Though this was a fictionalized version of one of my many dreams of drowning, many of its principles reflect my fear of the ocean. I despise it when people can't stop pain, and water is unforgiving. If you are here for the video and not my stories or horniness, a whole lot of nothing has happened over the span of the last hour or two. Essentially, this single frame summarizes everything. I got the mobile vehicle bay, sea moth, and moon pool. If you've never played this game and have no clue what any of that means, just know that I don't either. One of the things that I also learned in this time was how to make water using bleach. But I'll have to get back to all of you to see if this works in real life or not. The Seamoth is incredibly cool, but really fragile without any upgrades, so just know that I end up repairing it more times than I get hugs in a month. You may be thinking that that can't possibly be very many, but you'd be wrong. Over at the channel's Discord server, we are building an incredibly supportive community for all sorts of folks. We have music bots, meme channels, and even a spicy section for those feeling a little bit frisky. All that, plus a chance at hanging out with me in a voice channel, makes this Discord a chance for you to feel comfortable with who you are and make some new friends. Please check it out in the description below. While I was going on that shameless self-plug, on the radio, another ship picked up the Aurora's distress call and started heading our way, the Sunbeam. So I started making my way over in the Seamoth. This was a little bit scary because this was the furthest that I've ever been away from my home, and the waters were incredibly deep. But eventually, I was shocked to see land. While I was heavily confused at first and got super distracted by killing crabs with a knife smaller than most of my dildos, I did eventually find the spot. While looking around, however, I saw something that I'd like to add to my personal collection. After looking around for a little bit, I managed to find a purple tablet that opened up the door that I was able to get inside to explore the building. This is incredibly cool, and I think that this would be an interesting place to build a base if you can, but it's also really empty and rather ominous. The entire time I felt like flying snakes were going to pop out and turn me into a pregnant lady to carry their offspring. Eventually I got to the lower level and got stabbed by the doctor, who said that I was far too sick to disable the security system that apparently targets any ships that leave or come into the atmosphere. This unfortunately also includes the sunbeam, our only shot of actually getting off this planet. I can't really begin to describe my level of shock here. I genuinely thought that I was going to be able to get off this planet and finally get a cheeseburger with extra pickles. Speaking about pickles, our sponsor for today's video is Dr. Cream. Cream has been a great contributor to the politics channel and our Discord, so when they suggested that drinking pickle juice had numerous health benefits, I knew I was going to need to take a look at the research. As it turns out, that extra juice at the bottom of your jars can prevent muscle cramps, aid in digestion, and is packed with antioxidants and vitamin C. All of these factors together really reflect the need for you to drink pickle juice. Dr. Cream has also stated to many of their fellow researchers that they are on their 106th jar of pickle juice for this year. The health benefits speak for themselves, so get your pickle juice today. Now, back to the video. Armed with tons of equipment like the laser cutter and plenty of supplies, I figured that now would be a good time to visit the Aurora. Taking the Seamoth over, I park at the front portion of the ship, where the giant hole opens up a walkway deeper into the ship. There are several crabs here that honestly scare me a little bit, and the fire does actually damage you, believe it or not, but eventually I was able to get inside. There are tons of great resources in here, including a plethora of batteries, nutrient blocks, and water. And in order to get through the damaged portions of the ship, I needed to not only use their new laser cutter, but the repair tool as well. I'm able to get several fragments, but most notable is the blueprints for the prawn suit, a large mechanized suit that can be capable of surviving high water pressure, mining resources, and grappling across the watery depths. I did find a locked door, the captain's quarters, that I couldn't get through unfortunately. We'll be back here after a long while to open it, but I love how young and naive I felt in these moments. Eventually, I made it to what I remember as the engine room. Several holes were in the bases of these 4 stripper poles, so I went around and repaired them all to slowly reduce the radiation in the nearby waters. On my way out, I contemplated jumping off into the water, but was far too scared to do so. But after walking around, I was able to hop on my Seamoth and return to base. This felt like a really important step for me, as I was able to utilize several of my tools, get a bunch of resources, and build up my confidence around the Aurora. Getting back to base, I sort out my stuff and start thinking about what I should do next. Most of the games I play have some sort of a clear objective, or I know what I need to do to beat them. But Subnautica is a different animal entirely. I really had no clue where to go, so I collected resources or looked at my PDA for the 100th time. Part of me thinks that this is beautiful. The other part of me wishes that there was a little bit more direction. I did end up in an area with blue balls, but I wasn't really able to play with them all that much due to how sensitive they were, so I decided to just add on to my base. Never did I end up making something that I was super proud of. After all, this is a YouTube video, and I do need to be somewhat quick when I play games, but this place did grow on me soon enough. After basically playing The Sims, the next thing on the to-do list was getting a prawn suit. The problem? It's expensive, and most of the items I don't even know where to find. I ended up exploring for more time than I really care to admit, but I'll be damned if this game isn't beautiful. I have a lower-end computer, and it still looks stunning and is ridiculously smooth, allowing me to visit areas with floating islands, massive underwater wrecks with tons of little fragments scattered around their multiple passageways and corridors, and areas with mushroom trees. My D&D party would have absolutely loved this. We never really finished the campaign, but my players would always find a way to do stupid stuff. At the end of one of our sessions, we somehow got on the topic of mushrooms and ended up talking about them for at least half an hour, just trying to answer the question of, what if everything was just mushrooms? The next time one of our party members couldn't show, I sent the party to a mushroom dimension, and the group had to figure out how to end the political rivalry between the red and the yellow mushrooms. Eventually, it was revealed that the yellow mushrooms weren't actually very friendly at all, and were using the red mushrooms for slave labor. So the party destroyed the yellow mushroom village, and went to the lands of the blue mushrooms to take the portal back to the real world. The part I find funny is that the players who were present for the session constantly mentioned random parts of the dimension to the player who had missed out, so they were completely confused on the whole mushroom thing. Speaking about being left out, to catch you up on the speed after a little bit of off-camera mining, we finally have a prawn suit. I literally walked around it in a few seconds and realized that it was basically worthless without any of its upgrades, so I parked it out front and didn't touch it for like half the game. At this point, I knew I needed to go even deeper if I was going to start making progress in the storyline of the game, so I did just that. I found even more blue balls and stumbled across a huge wreck. I was hoping to find more parts of the prawn suit, be able to actually use it, or to find parts for an even larger vehicle, the Cyclops, but I didn't really find too much worthy of note. At one point though, I did almost die of dehydration because I couldn't find any bladderfish, but fortunately I had 3 first aid kits and random fish do give you a little bit of hydration. I realized at this point that even though I had adapted to the world, I was still inexperienced and could die at any moment. After that kerfluffle, I headed back to the base only to find out that I had somehow gotten water in it in the time that I was absent. I went to the Discord to see who wet the bed while I was out, and I got some interesting responses. The Seamoth is really fun to drive at night, and is kind of relaxing in a hey, I am really uncomfortable, please give me a glass of water that isn't drugged kind of way. I spent a lot of time really doing nothing. I knew I needed to go deeper, but I didn't have the death module for the Seamoth at this point, so I was stuck above 300 meters. With the collection of vehicles that I had accumulated growing by the day, it only made sense for me to try to add another one, the Cyclops. The Cyclops requires a total of 9 fragments, 3 for the hull, 3 for the bridge, and 3 for the engine. While out looking for some more fragments, the PDA said this crazy line and I saw my first Leviathan. Needless to say, I tucked my chastity cage between my legs and dipped out. The game at this point became another loop of looking around for resources in different wrecks, one that I once again lost myself to. This isn't the first time I've lost myself either. I used to be in a group of friends who were like family. If we weren't at work, we were doing things together. Messing around in the stores, going to movies, hiking, running, you name it. 4 guys, including me, and 3 girls, made an odd group, but we were tight and didn't have any problems between us that were unresolved. We all had this chemistry that made life bearable. It made me feel like I was alive after years of having superficial relationships. Cassandra and Kent started seeing each other a little bit more and messing around with one another, so we all knew that they were getting together, which was cool for the most part, and we all just joked about getting a room when they got a little bit too frisky. Elton's apartment is where we hung out most of the time because he had the best place and didn't have a significant other. I knocked on his door after getting off of work one day, expecting this warm brotherly embrace like usual, but the sour expression said something else was going on. I walked in to see Cassie sitting on the couch with Jan, Marissa, and Wade. Her brunette hair was brushed out of her face by Jan and I saw tears stream down her face. Never in our entire time of having known each other had I ever seen her cry like that. If you've ever seen your siblings cry, you felt their pain. It was devastating. She showed proof of Kent cheating on her, images, text messages, and even a call log. Wade, Elton, and I looked at one another, nodded, and told the ladies we'd be back. The 3 of us got in Wade's truck and drove over to Kent's house, a trailer park just outside of town. At first, I thought we'd just talk it out, but as the door opened and Wade pushed Kent to the ground and blood pooled around his head, I knew we were not there for a talk. We all like to think that we're tough when we're young. Unbreakable. But that moment broke us all. As Wade put his hand down to get up, it slipped a little in a puddle of red. He looked at us with eyes bloodshot with adrenaline and tears. This was not self-defense. We poured alcohol from the fridge all over Kent, turned on the gas stove, and dropped a match. Wade got back in his truck, and Elton and I walked in opposite paths to get back to the apartment. Getting back after a few hours, I get in my car and take off without saying goodbye. As the streetlights and green hit my face, I felt as though I had just lost everything and had nothing. My family, my life, my future. Eventually I got my crap together and made a few upgrades for the Seamoth, including a death module and a sonar upgrade. These 2 upgrades combined would allow me to go deeper and be relatively safe while doing so. I ended up going to the Degassi habitat in the glowing mushroom area. I was able to get a ton of upgrades from this, including the water filtration machine and a multi-purpose room. This was huge for my enjoyment of the game as I no longer had to micromanage water as intensely. Following the trail of the Degassis, I end up at yet another island. This one, even more pretty than the last. Tons of local flora here could be gathered to eat, so you know I was acting like I was at an all-you-can-eat buffet. In addition to getting my fill of nutrients and ensuring that other holes also got filled, I was able to find 3 metal structures and follow the rest of their prior inhabitants' story. It was remarkable that they were able to survive like they did, but I really don't see how they had food issues, as I was able to find several still thriving plants and grow beds, so I could have the same or greater experience. The plants were helpful, but I was able to also find a purple tablet here. I wasn't sure when they would be useful, but the fact that one has already opened up a green force field, chances are there are bound to be other locked doors. I threw down a beacon here just in case I ever end up needing to come back for a vacation home or more crops, but it isn't long before I'm back at the base, dropping off supplies, and expanding. In order to do so, I do need to keep in mind of the structure's integrity to avoid future accidents like the one from earlier. Combined with the scanner room and the UI chip, I was able to find all the lithium needed for any future projects. Because I was recording for over a day and a half, and I don't have nearly enough stories to fill that much time, we will have to skip over a lot of the resource gathering that I had to do to build much of the cool equipment that I ended up using. Just know that I did end up painstakingly collecting each and every resource while watching The School for Good and Evil. Get ready folks, because it's time for Owl's Movie Reviews. Sophie and Agatha, two young girls who are completely uncontent with the lives that they live, are yeeted by a giant unfluffy bird to a dimension where two schools, one of evil and one of good, form the balls at the base of a giant tower. Essentially, people kiss each other, and people wear corsets to make the boobs larger to appeal to a larger audience. While this does succeed for individuals such as myself, it did receive a 5.8 out of 10 on IMDb, and had a 38% on Rotten Tomatoes. My rating is 6 cubic feet due to the cringy plots, but stunning visuals and members of the itty bitty titty committee being supported. As I sit here on top of the life pod looking for something that I can't remember, it's funny to feel like I've made no progress. Sure, I have the sea moth, prawn suit, and great equipment, but at the end of the day, it's all tied to one location. Back when I played Minecraft like it was a religion, I would often put all of my armor and gear into a chest, and set off in a new direction like I was trying to prove myself, that I could start again if I needed to. If I were to replay this game at some point, I'd like to make an effort to do that more, to have more bases littered around in case there was ever an emergency. I did that a little bit over at the other side of the map with a multi-purpose room, bioreactor, and scanner room, but didn't end up using it as much as what I would have liked. Even still, it made it a lot easier to find a few of the nearby wrecks for more progression of research. That said, I did continue to work on my main base by adding bioreactors, plants, water filtration systems, and medical fabricators. Some parts of this game never really got easier. The sonar equipment allowed me to see everything, and in doing so made the game that much more terrifying. Unfortunately, this glimpse of terror gave me a bright idea. If I needed engine parts, why not go to the back of the Aurora where the thrusters are at? I set off in the morning through the kelp forest and quickly became hesitant as I began hearing terrifying roars and having decreased visibility. Sticking close to the wall of the ship, using sonar, and a good bit of luck was what I believe kept me alive. As I moved further along, the roars seemed to double and the ship continuously shook, making the whole situation super scary. This was definitely the worst part of the game so far, as I was forced to watch what I believed to be sudden death loom in the distance. Fortunately for my testicles, I don't think that they could raise up much more. I was able to eventually find all the fragments needed for the Cyclops blueprint, and now only needed to get out of this depth trap. At one point I really thought that one was following me, but I quickly lost it and headed back to base to look at the resources required for this absolute beast of a vehicle. Funnily enough, I had spent so much time playing and gathering resources that it wasn't long before I was able to head up to the mobile vehicle bay and watch it be brought to fruition under the cover of night. It was really marvelous and reminded me of a trip I took to Alaska to see the Northern Lights. One of my uncles that I actually like was in the military for much of his career, specifically the Air Force. He was stationed in Alaska and his family were visiting him while I was on break. They ended up asking me if I wanted to come with, and after some hesitation, I agreed, packed my bag, and joined them on the flight when the date came around. Not only was it my first time flying, but it was actually my first time leaving the States, even if it was for a short while. We ended up landing in Alaska and were able to make our way into the subdivision he stayed in. I spent most of the week that I was there just walking around and admiring the distant mountains, but my fondest memory from the trip came from one night in the backyard as we all sat around the campfire and listened to my uncle talk about his work. I unfortunately don't recall much of the stories, but I do recall the motion-blurred sky full of green, cyan, and hot pink color that is completely unfounded in nature in most environments. Something about it was perfect, like they were a message from a higher power. While I don't necessarily believe in anything specific, I do believe that I shit my pants at least 6 times throughout this video. In order to actually beat Subnautica, you need to travel to a deep underground network of caves. How I had stumbled across this was by accessing the cave network near LifePod 2. Using the camera on the bottom of the Cyclops, I was able to see the giant opening that I was going to be traveling into. Using the same sonar ability, I could truly get an estimate as to how large this formation really was. Massive pools of dangerous liquid and trees with limbs strong enough to puncture the hole made this experience lead to the pulsing of my prostate. I ended up getting out of the Cyclops at one point because I wasn't sure I'd have enough battery to be able to come back up. Inside, I took the sea moth deeper. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to explore much deeper due to not having a higher crush depth. Despite this, I found this massive tree and immediately tried cutting it down like the human being that I am. I also found another alien structure, but needed to head back to the Cyclops to grab the purple tablet. This became a frequent issue of having to backtrack due to power, nutrition, or supplies, so this will be the last time that I mention this. After regrouping at the Cyclops, I explore more of this strange laboratory. Alien remains looked like they were being studied here, but in terms of lore, I'm afraid I'm not sure what its purpose was outside of maybe trying to fix the virus. I'm really not that perceptionate when it comes to picking up information in games, so if you've got a good understanding of what this building represents, please feel free to share with the rest of the class. I used the orange tablet to get into another building to grab a few ion cubes and a creature egg. Unfortunately, I never ended up hatching this, so I'll definitely have to give another go at the game for at least that reason. The Leviathans in here were scary, but I needed to stick around to be able to make better equipment. Nickel, an ore found at the base of the tree that I tried to cut down, is useful for making upgrades that increase safe diving distances for various vehicles. I go on a little bit of a rampage, collecting as much as I can before starting to head back to base with my tail between my legs. Yes, I've got one that isn't a belt. Back at the base, I managed to get my sea moth stuck, so I spent a solid 5 minutes just fixing that. I'm not sure that this is what flooded my base, but I also had to deal with that, which took another 5 minutes. Thank the Lord Almighty that I'm not a live streamer. After getting to the base put back together, I started charging the power cells. There is an auto charger that you can get for the Cyclops that involves using heat, but I'm taking notes from my PDA and she said that I shouldn't get too comfortable here. One of the things I mentioned earlier was that the prong suit is basically useless without any upgrades. Standing by this statement and wanting to fix that predicament, I hop on the sea moth and search around for more wrecks. Unfortunately, this took a while, so I've got another story for you. This one is for those long-time kinky viewers. But I'll try to keep it at least something that my mom wouldn't shun me again for. I was hanging out with my goth girlfriend at the time, eating pretzels while watching Underworld Evolution, when she suggested that we get some Taco Bell. If you know anything about the place, you know that either constipation or diarrhea will inevitably follow after consumption, so sexy time is best committed beforehand, unless you are into scat, which is a whole other story that involves the time that I fucked in a garbage bin, but we'll get to that at a later date. I had suggested that we get dessert before supper, and her little tongue pierced through her lips and danced across as a smile formed, so I knew I was in for a special treat. Just as the sun gets a random ass limb from the back and stabs Santa twice, once right in the shoulder and once in the chest with a sword, she cuddled me up and eventually we were in the shape of the food we were just eating, with just a little bit of extra cream. The real icing on the cake though was being able to roleplay as Batman with grappling hooks, while being able to be drilled in so many different positions. After messing around for a little bit, we headed out towards Taco Bell. The trip did take a little while, so we listened to her favorite songs from Pierce the Veil, and she rubbed my thigh while she drove. As we went a little bit further in our relationship, she had kind of become the dominant one, and I enjoyed the perks of being a golden retriever boyfriend. It was a good thing, and I miss it sometimes. Utilizing the prong suit and the grappling hook, I was able to get through the lava zone and be able to ninja my way through the blue tablet after a few different trips. Fortunately, I was able to charge my batteries by going through the portal room nearby, but that did take a lot of extra time. For whatever reason, I never made all the useful tools that would have made this trip so much easier. Something as simple as a torch completely escaped my mind, and I was stuck with the sea glid's light the whole time, and the reinforced diving suit definitely would have been handy while dealing with the sea dragons. Anyways, I was able to find the clit, travel across the lava lake, and use the blue tablet to open up the door. It pains me to summarize almost 2 hours of traumatizing experience into a single sentence, without really showing you how painful it was to wander around in the dark with a vibrating butt plug. But just know that things worked out, and I was able to maintain a few brain cells. Walking through Hulk's man cave, and meeting a woman who could satisfy every single one of my kinks, I finally started feeling like I was close to beating the game. This whole process was brutal getting down here, but the real kicker was that the game requires you to get enzymes to be able to hatch the queen's babies. My understanding of this whole process was that semen is required to hatch the eggs, so hopefully that makes as much sense to you guys as it does to me, because I actually learned a whole lot about chickens from playing this game. After almost an hour of going back and collecting the ghost weed from the Lost River and snagging up whatever the hell else I needed, I could finally become the dad that my Discord server thinks that I am. Unfortunately, my new wife died with grief almost immediately, and I touched this puke from my kids that removed my treasured STIs. While I was in the area, I watched myself be stabbed again and proved that I was cured. If I was playing for my own enjoyment, I would have stopped here, so I could return to the game every so often and appreciate the memories that I had during this time. But we aren't quitters here, so I pushed through the grind. Remember how I said that we need to head back to the captain quarters at some point? Yeah, well, it turns out that you don't get the code to the door until roughly 5 days after the sunbeam gets blown up. Trailing up the ramp past all the flesh-eating crabs, running through the fire that is still miraculously burning rather well, and typing in the code, I'm able to find the blueprint for a rocket ship. Much like the Cyclops and the prawn suit, this rocket takes an absolutely massive amount of resources. Unlike the Cyclops and the prawn suit, however, it is a multi-stage build that you get to use for roughly 30 seconds. If you made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for joining me in this journey. It really was a fun video to put together, and I hope that you enjoyed it. While I gather resources left and use up the remaining footage, I'd like to take the time to give a review on the game. Subnautica is perfect. An open world environment that has a setting unlike any game that I've ever played, leaves the player enjoying exploration in a fear-based system that wasn't quite advertised on the tin. But what the game fails to do for me is make the journey as enjoyable as what it could have been. Several times throughout playing, I felt overwhelmed with the complex crafting recipes, lack of guidance, and the textbook worth of lore found within the PDA. While some players may find that they absolutely love these features, these are my humble opinions as a YouTuber who didn't get to fully appreciate the game as I raced against the clock to produce a video suitable for my viewers. Whether or not I will play this game again on this channel will definitely be left up to the feedback on this video, but one thing is for certain, if I'm ever craving a game that has a healthy balance of enjoyment and emotion, Subnautica will be one of the first games I play to scratch that itch. As we take off to safety, my name is Owl, and I really appreciate you checking out my video. If you liked it, please hit that like button harder than a Leviathan eating a sea moth. Have a good one.